Presentation of dialogue on Idaho Public Television is made possible through the generous support of the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation, committed to fulfilling the Moore family's legacy of building the great state of Idaho.
Hi, I'm Marcia Franklin with Dialogue on Idaho Public Television. Many of my dialogue guests are so interesting, I don't want our conversation to end. So it doesn't. We tape a dialogue extra, going into more depth on a subject or learning more about what motivates my guests to do what they do. Now, coming up next is an example of a dialogue extra. After taping our program with the Idaho producers of Bravo, a documentary about the Battle for Khe Sanh, we continued our conversation. I wanted to know more about how the film was made and what it was like to be at the longest siege of the Vietnam War. Welcome to this Dialogue Web Extra. I'm Marcia Franklin. I'm here with Ken and Betty Rodgers. They are the producers of a film called Bravo, which will be shown on Idaho Public Television, about Bravo Company at the Siege of Khe Sanh in 1968. Also joined by Steve Wiese, who's in the film, who's also a veteran of Khe Sanh. All the way here from California. Thanks so much for driving up with your wife. I really appreciate it. Hope you enjoy Boise while you're here. Ken and Betty, first, I want to talk a little bit more about how you did this. We talked about a little bit more about the why in the program, but you know, you're not professional. You weren't professional filmmakers, and you came up with this idea, Betty, after going to reunions with Ken. So, after you came up with the idea, then you started. What was the next point for people out there that might be thinking of doing something like this?
I went to my first Idaho Media Professionals meeting, and I don't know how I got the courage, but I stood up and I announced that Ken and I were thinking about making a documentary film. And all I remember is the great response I had from people like Lance Thompson and others who said, "You can do this. You can do it. You have a heart for it. You have a story. You can do it." And so then we began.
And you started by filming. You filmed at the reunion. At a reunion, yes.
Well, you know, it was first we talked about, talking about making a movie and making a movie are two different things. And we talked about the movie, and then we contacted the Marine Corps Heritage Foundation and asked them if they had a grant, and they said, "Send us a letter and tell us what you're doing." And they gave us a little bit of money, and we thought, boy, we're rich, and let's go to town. So we hired some local videographers, and we interviewed me, and then we contacted everybody we knew that was in Bravo Company and asked them if they wanted to be in a film, and some said yes, and some said they could come to the reunion in San Antonio in 2010, where we flew a local videographer, Mark Spear, down there, and we interviewed 9 people. Then Betty and I went on the road to Washington, D.C., to the National Archives and to the Marine Corps History Division, who were extremely helpful. On the way, we interviewed 2 people, one of them who was extremely ill and died not long after, Dan Horton. We spent 3.5 weeks in Washington in the bowels of the National Archives getting film. And
critical, yeah. Critical.
Yes, it was. And they were great help, too.
And was that at no cost? Did they charge you for those, or are they available to the public?
No, but we had to do all the work, and we had to find everything, and we took photographs of photographs,
right,
and we did video of videos.
Right.
We'd put the video on a table, and it came up on a monitor, and she set up our little video camera and took the video of the video. Luckily, there were people there that did that for a living, and they helped us out, that worked for other folks, and they spend all their time in the National Archives researching the information for specific projects.
And you even found some recordings that the Marine Corps didn't know it had.
Right. Well, I knew they had them because I remember being interviewed in the field after specific combats.
Right.
So I just told them, and they gave me a shoebox full of 5x8 cards and says, "Well, if it's in there, if it exists, you might find it in there." And we found a bunch of stuff, and some of it was relevant, and some of it wasn't, and some of it was stuff about Khe Sanh that I had no idea had ever happened and was very interested, but it didn't fit our film.
And Steve, we mentioned the recordings that you made for your mom that are in the film, and you didn't even know those existed, and they became an important part of the film. Talk about that.
After my mom passed away, I went to the house and was going through some of her stuff, and I found these recordings, which I had no idea, were there, and I had them for 6-7 years at least, and I couldn't listen to them. I mean, when I originally found them, I kind of got excited. Oh, this is great, and I turned one on, and within 10 seconds, I turned it off and couldn't listen to it. So it was 6-7 years later before I could finally get to a point where I could listen to them, and they were really, really difficult to listen to.
And it was hard, we should say, not because you were listening to your own voice, but also because you were listening to voices of people who had been killed.
Correct. Yeah, it was all the guys that were on the tapes. It wasn't what I was listening to myself. So that was very difficult.
But amazing you had the presence of mind to make those.
I think at the time I wasn't making them thinking about anything other than I was just writing a letter home to my parents. But we were getting rocketed so much that the one afternoon I thought, and I was sending a tape, they would listen to it and send one back. So I was just erasing everything and thought they were doing the same and just sending me back the same tape, blank, or with a recording which I would erase.
Oh no, moms wouldn't do that.
Yeah, well, I didn't know
Mom's
that.
Mom's going to keep your voice.
But I just thought, it'd be kind of cool to tape some of the incoming rockets so they could see what it sounded like, not thinking about my parents. I think about now, if my son was in combat and sent me a tape like that, I would die, but, I was 18 years old at that time, and it was like, I just thought, they'll probably really think this is kind of cool.
And one of those is in the film, those blasts, and I think there's a voice of, is there a voice of somebody saying 2 feet or something? I mean, it was really...
Oh, that was me.
That was you. Very close.
I hit right... Well, actually, my bunker took a direct hit on one mortar, but that particular one it hit like 2 foot in front of the trench line. And
you recorded it.
Yeah.
Well, for a producer to find that...
Yes.
That's...
We were pretty ecstatic.
And so was John Nutt, the editor, to be able to weave those sounds into the film was... it really made a significant difference in the authenticity of it.
Yeah, yeah. And so you're talking about John Nutt, and then you also had a professional sound person work on this. You had to raise money.
Right.
You had to use your own money. We can talk about that. And you had to raise money.
Right.
And you did that through crowdsourcing.
We did some of it through Indiegogo, which is one of these crowdsourcing things. We had 3 campaigns. We had a friend of ours that took that on and did it for us, and
she's an associate producer.
And we got Carol Caldwell-Ewart, and we got some money out of it. We got money from friends. We got money from people that on Twitter. I mean, because I was tweeting stuff, and I got people on Twitter were sending me $25, and we got money from people I have no idea how they ever heard about it.
Well, this old dog's learning a whole bunch of new tricks: Twitter, crowdsourcing, videotape.
Right. And so it's like, and then we put a substantial amount of my retirement account into it. And at some point in time, it just, for me, it became, I didn't care what it cost. It just became, I have to make this film. And I didn't start out that way. I was kind of skeptical. Okay, yeah, we're going to make a movie. But once we started, and I had those interviews, it was like, I got to get this thing done. And it was like, we were putting in 70-hour weeks. And
your relationship survived.
Yeah.
Yes.
What did it do for the relationship? Was it a...
We've always been like that. We've worked together for years.
Yeah. So
she's the boss, and I do what she tells me. So.
Well, it has to be an intense experience, though, because it's not just, it's a film, yes, but it's a film about something very personal that happened to you and something very painful.
But she understood that. And so,
and
she is deferred to me on a lot of things on here, probably because of that fact.
It's his, he wanted to tell this story.
It's my, there's 15 people on this thing, but this is how I saw it. Somebody else may see this experience completely different than I did, but but this is the story I saw, and so I was really passionate about it. And it goes back to that thing we were talking about earlier about this is a heck of a story, And
you knew that coming out at
right.
age...
When I was 21, and
yeah.
I was an old guy in Khe Sanh. I was 21. Most of the guys were 18, 19 years old. I was 21. And so,
But you had that sense as an observer type.
Right.
Leaving on the plane, looking down. Wow.
And I want to mention how many Vietnam veterans have said this is the first movie that they've ever felt really told their story. And VA employees come to us and say, now you've really helped us understand Vietnam veterans better. So I think that Ken had a good, strong sense of how to tell the story, and it's had good results.
Well, there's another Ken actually there's two other Kens,
Yes.
which is interesting. But Captain Ken Pipes is in this, and I'd like to take a listen to a quote of his that's in the film.
And the tragedy is, for us, is that they were ours. That's a tragedy. And it always has been, and it always will. But to many people, it's reading about it in a book. It's reading about it in a cold after-action report. It's reading criticisms and reading this and that. But that was our family, too, that we lost.
So that's the point, isn't it, really? Because people read about battles when they're studying in college or high school or whatever, but they don't necessarily really feel what it was like.
Right. People don't understand, unless they've probably been in combat, that these guys that I was there with, they were closer than anybody in my family was to me. I mean, I knew everything about them and their families. If somebody got a package in with, they didn't get it, we all got it. And, when one of those people were injured or killed, it hurt. It hurt, and it hurt deep, So it's what the skipper's talking about there. I can't imagine the guilt that he carries, because, he's as a commander. I mean, he made decisions, and I'm sure I know he carries the guilt that he made a decision that maybe cost people lives, So
Very important to have him in the film, and he didn't really want to do it, did he?
No, when San Antonio, when we were filming it, he showed up, and Michael OHara came to me and he said, I don't think he's going to do it. I don't think he's going to do it. So I went to him.
Because of the guilt?
Yeah, well, and he didn't want to, I don't
relive it.
I don't think he
said
wanted
he
to
didn't think he could do it.
Yeah.
And he didn't think emotionally, he didn't think he could
I
do
don't think
it.
and he was really worried about how he was, if he was going to be able to even talk about it without completely breaking down. And so I went to him and I said, I don't have a movie if you aren't in this thing. And he showed up. So
yeah, he
kind of ties it together in some way,
Well, you have a number of people who were in more of a command position, and they do, I think, because they're seeing it from different eyes as well. It's different eyes, but the same eyes. That's the thing. Now, speaking of seeing it and watching it, what was it like for you? He's looking through all this. He knows what's there. What was it like for you to see the product for the first time, the film?
Well, for one thing, I thought it was just going to be like a discussion and a little documentary thing. I wasn't expecting, when that thing came on, I wasn't prepared for it. And the original time when it showed, I mean, that was tough, actually. I mean, it was like I was reliving it over again, and it impacted me hard.
Did you want to leave the room, or did you have to stop it sometimes, or were you able to get through the whole thing?
Well, I got through it, but not without tears. I mean, that was tough to watch for me the first time. It was tough for me to watch the third time. It just, every time I see it, it just brings back, emotions and memories that, you try not to deal with, but that kind of throws it right in your face.
You glad you did it?
I'm extremely glad I did it. Thinking back on it, I thought, I can't believe I actually agreed to do it, but but now I'm so glad I did, because you know, we have an obligation to make sure these guys didn't die for nothing and they're forgot about. You know, I saw guys do things that were so unbelievably heroic, and it just, people should know, you know, people should know that. I mean, these guys did things that were just, it wasn't like a John Wayne movie. I mean, it was beyond belief. You know, a man charging a machine gun bunker and, you know, being mowed down, and then the next guy in my squad jumping up and charging it right after him, you know, knowing that he probably isn't going to make it. I mean, you know, people, you know, these guys fought a battle, and they fought hard, and every one of them are heroes.
Mm-hmm. In real time, we have veterans coming back as well.
Yes.
Seen combat, and I know you feel it's important that when people interact or meet those veterans, that they don't repeat some of the same things that were done to you.
I do. I feel strongly that, you know, the public in general, and I don't think they mean it maliciously, at least I hope not, but they should have a little more sympathy for these guys coming back from combat that have seen and experienced combat. You know, asking them questions like, did you ever kill anybody, or how many people did you kill? You know, combat, if you're in a position where you actually have to kill someone, it's not something that's done or you take lightly. And, you know, people should have more respect. You know, show some compassion, and, you know, treat them with the dignity that they deserve. I'm getting a little choked up, so I'm having a hard time talking, but yeah, it's tough.
So how should they talk to someone? What are the appropriate questions to ask, do you think? I
think the question that you should ask is not ask a question unless you get the feeling that they're wanting to talk about it. You know,
maybe
I mean, you can ask in general,
right.
You know, or, you know, maybe ask, you know, were they in combat, but kind of let the person take it from there if they want to talk about it, or if they open that door a little bit. Some people really need to and want to talk about it. They need to talk about it. Some people, that door's shut and shut tight, and they don't want you trying to pry it open. They're just at a state where they're not ready to talk about it. I mean, I went for 30 years or more and never told a person anything about anything I went through. I just couldn't talk about it, nor did I want to.
Well, you were telling me that when you came home, the other kids your age were like, you know, just could not even relate.
I was looked at like, you know, I was some animal or something, you know. And
I don't think that happens now.
No, I don't. I think it's a whole different thing now, you know.
There seems to be a different sense of.
Yeah, I mean, now that, you know, when they come back in the airports, they get cheers. And,
exactly.
You know, I sure didn't get a cheer when I came in. But, you know, people, I think, have a lot more respect for, you know, individuals that have been into a war situation. Not necessarily even if they were in combat, just the fact that they went and served. When
you started to see what was happening after 9/11, you know, going into Iraq, going into Afghanistan, did that prompt feelings in you like, you know, one way or the other? Yes, we should be doing it, or, oh my gosh, war again?
That's a complicated issue, you know. I was initially in favor of, especially going into Afghanistan and also in Iraq. I didn't like Saddam Hussein, and although I don't think they managed it well, but that's for another issue, you know. But, you know, on the other side of it, it's like I said in the film, it's just a repetition of what we do.
Let's run that quote, because I think it's a really good quote, and we have it. It's your thoughts on war. If we could cue that up and run that.
Young men go off and they die and they kill people and they get scared and they come home, and you'd think that we could figure out how that group of people could tell somebody else not to do this again, but we don't. And it just goes on and it goes on and it goes on.
Now, you said at the beginning of this film, there's a statement, this is not a pro-war film, this is not an anti-war film, this is just what happened. But it sounds, when I listen to you there, that, you know, it's enough war for you.
Well, it's enough war for me, but that doesn't have anything to do with the fact that, you know, I had relatives that showed up to England with William the Conqueror, and I had relatives that fought against each other in the Revolution. I had relatives that fought in the Civil War, the First World War, Korea, World War II, relatives that fought in Vietnam. I fought in Vietnam. I've got relatives fighting in these conflicts right now. I mean, it just goes on. I mean, that's what we do. That's one of the things we do as a species.
But what I hear in that quote is a frustration.
Well, it's a frustration, but, you know, so what? You know, it's like...
So your sense when people watch this film is not that they should come away feeling like we need to stop going to war. I mean... Well,
I don't, you know, to me, they're going to come away with whatever feeling they're going to come away with, you know. I mean, some people are going to, you know, look at the heroic aspects of this film and be intrigued by that. Some people are going to look at the sadness and of the savagery and all that. So everybody's going to look at this film differently. So, you know,
it is your film in the end.
Yeah, it's our film, but, you know, I accept that we do war. I don't like war. I don't think anybody that's ever been in war really likes it. I don't, you know, if you went through what Steve Wiese and I went through, you don't ever want to do that again.
That's a fact.
You know, and somebody's going to have to really get under your skin before you're going to do it again. You know, that I don't think that I had any intention of trying to get somebody to think that we shouldn't be at war, but I do think that we need to understand that this thing is expensive. Every time we fight these wars, it's expensive, and I'm talking about human terms. I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about the cost in lives and what happens to people when they do this and they survive. Here we are, we've been at 45 years, almost 46 years since the Siege of Khe Sanh, and we're still paying the price here. I mean, emotionally. And that costs us as a society. Because if we're spending our time being frustrated about this, instead of doing something to the benefit of the human race, that's expensive. And that's the way I feel about it.
Has this experience turned you off or away from making films? My sense is that you might have another one in the pocket.
We have found that collaboration is a wonderful experience. We've found that that film is a perfect way to tell a story because it's so multidimensional, and we are talking about future films. So,
can you give a hint?
Well, through the Western Folklife Center, we're working with them to produce a short documentary.
How Cannon, or down there.
Talkie Telenitis,
yes.
And
in Salt Lake.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And they do cowboy poetry.
They do. The Western Folklife Center really is a Western Folklife Center where they like to tell stories of the West and keep them alive. And so we're very interested and committed to working with them on a short documentary about the West.
So you haven't pulled all your nose hairs out yet, huh?
Nope. No, it's fun. Making films is fun.
The creative process.
Yeah, yeah. It was a lot of, you know, I mean, it's heady stuff. And when, you know, we worked with some really great people in the film that were subjects, and we worked with some fascinating people that are professionals, and it's exciting.
And you were saying that you don't think that this would have gotten made if you hadn't moved to Idaho.
We wouldn't have had the time.
Yeah. Yeah, we slowed our lives down so that we could be busier than we've ever been in our lives. But, oh my gosh, the people
Say
here...
that again. You slowed your lives down so that you could be busier than you ever were in your lives.
That's what's happened. But there's such a great support system here. People like Ben Shed and, you know, the people in Idaho Media Professionals and all the cheerleaders we've had.
So you would encourage others to try.
Oh, yes.
If they have a story inside of them.
Sure.
Or stories that they want to preserve.
Yep. I think that, you know, and it's so easy now to make film that, relatively speaking, that yes, and tell your story. The caveat to that, of course, is, you know, a lot of people are pretty good on the tech end, and they don't have a story to tell. You got to have a good story. If you don't have a good story, the rest of it doesn't work. So.
Well, that's a perfect segue. Let's wrap up by showing some concluding quotes from your film.
I have something that most people in the rest of the world will never own. I don't care how wealthy they become, or how smart they are, or where they go. But for a little bitty space and time, I was allowed the distinct privilege and the high honor of walking across hallowed ground with the bravest Marines that ever wore the uniform.
To be part of Bravo Company in that time and in that place and under those circumstances, to be able to say, yes, I was with them. I was one of them. Remained one of the proudest moments of my life.
And you're saying those are your guys right there in that photo.
That picture's my squad.
Well, the words will be there forever. The preservations of the memories. So thank you very much for doing that and for taking the time to talk about the process. You've been listening to Ken and Betty Rodgers, producers of Bravo, a film about Bravo Company at Khe Sanh, talk about how the journey that they went on to produce this, and from Steve Wiese, who's one of the participants in the film and a veteran from Khe Sanh. Thank you so much for taking the time. I'm Marcia Franklin. For more information on this film, please go to the Dialogue website. Just go to idahoptv.org and click on Dialogue. You were just watching a Dialogue Extra. If you'd like to see more extras, just go to our streaming site at video.idahoptv.org. Click on Dialogue and scroll down to Clips. For Dialogue, I'm Marcia Franklin.
Presentation of Dialogue on Idaho Public Television is made possible through the generous support of the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation, committed to fulfilling the Moore family's legacy of building the great state of Idaho.